All right, everybody, this is round 2 of our sleepers board on the Yahoo side. And the reason is we did our last one like 3 days before a board reassessment. Some of those guys no longer are extremely late round grabs. Some of them require that you take them a little bit sooner. And so it's important to redo it, make sure that everybody's got the proper information in front of them. This is Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I am your host, Dan Bespris. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Bespris. You can find Old Man Squad on Twitter at Old Man Squad. It's an easy one, isn't it? It'll follow you back in addition to also giving you the drop on whenever shows get posted. Also stuff from our amazing hosts that have grown in number. We got like almost 20 shows now over there. And please take a second at the front end. Just click the thumbs up, quick like, blah, blah. You guys know the drill. Subscribe no matter how you're taking in the content. And if you have a second to drop a 5-star review, that would be extraordinarily helpful. Spotify, Apple, those are the spots for that. As we did with our last sleepers piece, this is going to involve players with a pre-rank on Yahoo after 100. There's context for all of them. Some of these guys have an ADP that's a little bit earlier. Some of them have an ADP that's a little bit later. Just sort of flow with us here. I'll give an explanation on each. And for those that are watching along, I'll try to very quickly throw a picture of the player up on the screen. It'll just be a screen grab from Yahoo, so you know who we're talking about should you want to bounce around a little bit or figure out what we were talking about and when. So Herb Jones and Alex Caruso, which are 99 and 100, are actually on the list of players that I really would like to take where they're at. But technically, I said I was going after 100. So the first player that falls into my department of who I think could have a really nice little run here is at 106, and that's Ivica Zubac. The guys in front of him, I don't see the same kind of leap ability. I know that sounds crazy because Jonathan Kuminga's in there, and everybody loves Jonathan Kuminga. I see a lot of holes in his game. And with Zubac, who's a center, who's good at percentages, not going to like save your team in free throw, but he's generally around 70 or better and doesn't get to the line all that often. Last season, he shot 65% from the field, 12 points, 9 boards, 1.2 blocks. And the nice thing about Zubac right now is that there is room to grow. We see him go through these stretches where the Clippers played him more, and then we see him go through stretches where the Clippers played him less. The nice thing from a schematic standpoint, and some of you guys are hearing this for the second, third, or fourth time, is that with James Harden now running more of the offense, there's going to be more opportunities for Zubac to be a role man. Because that's more of a Harden type of offense than what Paul George was doing with the basketball. So Zoo's going to be involved in a lot of what the Clippers do. The nice thing here, the second nice thing on Zubac is that he was number 106 this last year on 26.5 minutes per game. I expect his role to get bigger. I expect his minutes to potentially go up, and you sort of mush those two things together, and you turn into a guy who can be a pretty big positive in field goal percent. He'll be a nice positive in rebounds. I think we might finally see the first year that Zubac averages 10 boards a ball game, because really all it would take is about another minute and a half, 2 minutes on the court to get him there. Scoring is obviously not going to be a strong suit for him, but I could see Zubac finishing in the 75 range. I don't think that's that much of a stretch, especially when you consider how close everybody's ranked here. And getting him after 100 is, to me, a lot of fun. Bogdanovic is now fresh to this sleepers board because before he was ranked 86th, and now he's ranked 108th. He was one of the big fallers on the latest board, and I was kind of upset about that because at 86, he had kind of priced himself out. He was number 63 last year on a very healthy season with a pretty high steals count. And the nice thing is Atlanta got thinner by all accounts. Yes, they brought in a guard in Dyson Daniels to replace DeJounte Murray, who they sent out, but they didn't really bring in anybody that was going to soak up usage. And so, yes, Trae Young's going to do more, and Jalen Johnson is going to get to do more. But Bogdanovic, a bench gunner, like, you know, even if that team starts to lean a little bit more into youth, Bogdan's going to get a bunch of shots. He's a great free throw shooter, so more usage there is a positive. Yes, the usage on the field goal side is a negative. They tend to kind of counterbalance each other. But all he has to do is replicate last year, and he's already an 80 range guy or better. So getting him at 108 instead of 86 now creates a little bit of that window to succeed that we might not have had last year, or at 86, last board, not last year. When you compare it season over season, one of the big changes for Bogdan this last year was he took about 3 additional shots per game. If for no other reason, then he just felt confident doing it. His steals went up. I don't know that that's going to hold, but the scoring to me is something that can. Is he going to be an 83% free throw shooter or a 92? Maybe you call it somewhere in the middle. And so there's room for him to possibly drop off a little bit, which is why at 86, you eliminated most of the margin for error. At 108, you now once again have margin for error. And that's a guy that I tend to like because of said margin. OG Anunoby, we've seen his ADP actually fall down outside of the top 100 now. It's at 103.1. His pre-rank is 109. He did move up during the latest Yahoo Board readjustment from 115 to 109. I still think there's a little meat on that bone. Similar to Bogdanovic, if he was going near 80, I don't think I would do it anymore because, again, you wipe out the margin for error. But he strikes me as a guy that with defensive stats alone, he should be able to get his way towards that 85 range. And then there's room for a little bit of growth beyond that. So I like Anunoby as well. He's kind of a cheap one because he's generally not going this late at 109 where his pre-rank is. But we're going by pre-rank right now, and I like him there. Onyeka Okongwu right behind him at 110. You guys are going to hear a few centers on today's show, and you're going to want to pick between them. So pause for a moment, pause your brain for a moment, and wrap it around this idea of, yes, even though I'm going to give you 4 or 5 big men on today's show, you don't need to take all of them. Choose your favorite. Zubac is likely my favorite, by the way, from this list, for whatever that's worth. But Okongwu is a guy who has the Clint Capella upside built in. So you already know that Okongwu can be around number 100 even when the Hawks are largely healthy. And yes, last year he wasn't particularly healthy, and he saw his block rate fall somewhat precipitously, actually, while the other stuff stayed somewhat constant. Let's just assume, for argument's sake, that the blocks are going to bounce around a little bit on Okongwu. They could end up where they were this past season. They could go back up a little bit. His role should stay about the same unless Atlanta finally makes the pivot. And to this point, they haven't, because defensively, Capella was bringing a lot more rebounds, defense, that kind of thing. But we don't know what the Hawks are going to be this year. If Okongwu jumps Capella, upside kicks in. If Capella gets hurt, upside kicks in. If Clint gets traded, upside kicks in. There's a lot of ways that this could get better for Okongwu. And now you don't have to spend... Now, unfortunately, he was a guy who jumped up a lot in the latest board from 164, where he was a no-brainer, to 110, where he's going to cost you a 10th round pick, and perhaps there are other safer options around him. But I don't know that those safer options have the Clint Capella upside, because if that dude disappears for any reason, Okongwu's a top 50 guy. If he doesn't, he finishes right around where he's getting drafted. Not my favorite in this group, Okongwu, but I get it. Walker Kessler at number 111. He is a blocks maven, and that's pretty much his fantasy game. Kessler played 23.5 minutes a game last year, averaged 2.4 blocks. That's what you're hunting for with him. Field goal percent, rebounds, blocks, bad free throw number, inconsistent minutes. Maybe they get better. The nice thing about Kessler here is that, again, you're kind of drafting a dude near the floor. Yeah, it could get worse. You could see his minutes drop below 23. You saw the blocks taper towards the end of last season. He was playing 23 minutes, but he was only blocking 1.4 shots instead of 2.4. So these little things can kick in. And therein lies the bit of the struggle of a guy who has a lot of his value tied up in one statistical category. You could take Kessler at 111, and he could do everything you expected, except he might block 0.8 shots fewer than you were gaming for, and then he's no longer a value. But again, at 111, there aren't that many guys floating around that have a legitimate chance to block 2 or more shots per game. He's kind of the last one left, even if you feel that some of these other centers are good shot blockers, like Mitchell Robinson still floating around there. Derek Lively, Trace Jackson Davis are all still in the mix. Kessler probably has the highest ceiling of all of these guys because if Utah just decides to start him, that's how he gets there. He is, again, not my favorite, and I forgot to put his face up on the screen for YouTube. Sorry. But I think he is a value at 111. So not my favorite, and don't worry, we'll recap all of these guys, and I'll kind of rank them a little bit for you guys, but I do think he's a value. Right behind Walker Kessler as a run on the board here. They've clustered them all. It's Derek Lively, the second at 112. He's on the list here as a little bit more of a free throw punt guy, and I know that Kessler's also quite bad at foul shooting, but Kessler also has a higher potential to block shots. Derek Lively was at 1.3. Excuse me, that's not correct number. Come on, Dan, get it right. He was at 1.4 in about 24 minutes per game, which, again, that was what Kessler did the last month and a half of last season. But we've seen Walker get to almost double that in the same number of minutes per game. Lively's not about to block 2.5 shots a game. So to me, he's a little bit more of like the floor of Kessler, unless he starts playing 28 minutes a night, which could happen. But with Daniel Gafford right there, those two guys are going to be button heads probably all damn season long. I don't know that Jason Kidd's ever going to really make up his mind on who's the leader in the clubhouse between those two. And so you kind of have to assume that Lively's playing 24, 25 minutes, and that's borderline enough if you're not punting free throws. If you're punting free throws, all these guys shoot up the board. Kessler, Lively, whatever. So Lively's probably the least interesting to me in this group. Not of everybody I'm going to talk about on this show, but in this group between Zubac, Kessler, Lively, Okongwu. There's 4 centers that are all pre-ranked within 6-7 slots of each other. Zubac would be my favorite. Kessler's probably number 2 for the insane blocks. Okongwu will be 3rd, and Lively would be my 4th in that group of centers. I don't have a whole lot to say additionally about Lively, so I think we can probably keep moving. I do want to keep today's show a little bit more brief. A bad habit lately of running 45 minutes long, and I really would like this one to stay at a half an hour or less. I think that's a little bit more fitting for people's listening pleasures. Mike Conley at 113. Old man Mike moved from 116 to 113, so basically no shift there. He's not a sleeper because he's old as dirt, but Conley was number 69 last year. Nice. 11.5 points, 6 boards, super low turnovers for an assist guy, 1.2 steals, 2.5 threes. He did it on pretty good percentages. Not great field goal, but certainly if a guy taking most of his shots from downtown, shooting 46% is pretty solid. 91% at the line. 29 minutes a game, so you could probably be like, oh, what if his minutes? Yeah, I mean, his minutes were already not that high, and Minnesota's not about to hand the team over to a different sort of boat captain. Talked about this with Conley before. His job on that Wolves team is to space the floor and help everybody around him make good decisions. He's basically an RA in a college dorm. He's a resident advisor. He's like, guys, here's a good decision on this possession. I'm going to give it to you there. You do this. We'll get a better shot out of it. He's just a guy who makes his team win. We see it everywhere he's gone lately. Utah, they were so much better with him around. Minnesota shows up. It's not that he's like doing magical things out there. He's just taking care of the basketball, making good decisions, and then other guys don't have to do that stuff. It's veteran leadership, and I see no reason why he wouldn't be able to pretty much replicate last year. Even if there's a little drop-off, you've got a 40-some-odd slot buffer, and so I continue to think Mike Conley's a pretty good choice. And again, I forgot to put his face up on the screen, so apologies. I got to get my act together on this one. This one's an iffy one for me. I'm going to throw Mitchell Robinson on the board. He's not my favorite, but he's like, did you miss out on Walker Kessler? Because then you got Mitchell Robinson, who's very similar, but shot an ungodly 41% at the free throw line. Even on only 2 attempts per game, that was atrocious. That was like game breaker bad. But he's over 1 steal and over 1 block, and he rebounds well, and his field goal percent is going to be high. If you're punting free throws, you don't have to worry about any of this stuff. If you're in any universe trying to actually attack free throws, he's a very scary player to take. Like, we can assume that it comes back up closer to 50. But we can't know for sure. And it's that same thing that I always talk about on this show. If I finish talking about a particular player and there's something that I say, you know what, we can't really know. And it's a guy that I generally avoid. But, I mean, he's going towards the end of the 10th round. If you've missed out on a bunch of centers, he's still out there. Even of the centers that are still available, there's still 2 or 3 that I'd rather have over Robinson. But he just does barely make the cut because what if? What if the free throw gets to 52 or 53%? What if they play him 30 minutes a game? What if he goes back to being 9 points, 11 rebounds, and like almost 3 defensive stats? That's a top 50 guy without any big changes having to happen. Colin Sexton is the next name on the board. He's at 118. He is not ever going to be a fantasy player that makes you go, ooh and ah, because he's points and he's decent percentages. And that's like kind of the story on Sexton. But it's worth noting that once he got promoted to a starting role last year, he hovered just inside the top 100 on points, good percentages, and he got up to about 6 assists per game. He doesn't hit that many threes. He doesn't rebound. He doesn't get defensive stats. His turnovers are going to be probably a little bit high for a guy that's only getting 6 assists. But there aren't that many guys that are going to give you 5+ assists at this part of the board. I would argue there's probably even fewer guys that are going to try to score 20 points at this part of the board. So with Sexton, not a ton of upside, but statistical scarcity comes into play when you're thinking about taking him near the end of the 10th round. He's not going to hurt you in any particularly large ways. He is, again, helpful typically in both percentages out of a guard slot. Again, doesn't take that many threes. Not getting you a ton of steals, but hopefully you can find those somewhere else. So I like Colin Sexton as kind of a sleepery type, even if the upside is somewhat capped. We're rumbling along. Not that many more names to go here, guys. So I'm making pretty good time, and I think we're right on time. Next name on the board, I'm going to have to flip over to the next page on the Yahoo rank list, and that is, of course, a rehash. Big Al, my man Al Horford, who moved way up in the rank board because Dan was screaming about him too damn much. Al Horford goes from 166 to 126. He's an 11th rounder now, which is the perfect place for him. This is where I thought he should have been going and where I'm still comfortable drafting him, most notably because he's going to get some games off. So target games played for Al Horford is probably in the neighborhood of, 64, 65 for the season. And his role is particularly good early in the year. He played 65 games last year. That's, I think, a reasonable target for him again. When he starts, he's a top 50, top 60 kind of fantasy play in 9-cat. Low turnovers helping, yes, but just all around. But again, first half of the season, he's probably going to miss, call it 8 or 9 games. Second half of the season, he'll miss another 8 games. And at some point in there, Porzingis probably starts playing starters minutes again. And then Al Horford goes back to that backup role. They're going to go easy on him. They had a finals run in the tank. He's old. He's beat up. He's, lovely for Roto for 9-cat, but there's all that old person stuff. So 11th round is exactly where he should be going because you're getting effectively like a 3-month hot free agent. That's what you're getting at Al Horford. You're paying for half a year. I wouldn't go much earlier, though. Because these earlier guys, you're hunting for a whole season. Amen Thompson at 127, another guy that moved up the board in the last reshuffling. Not a ton, 138 to 127, so he jumped up 11 slots. And, I talked about him on a show recently, and Matt talked about him on a show a couple days ago, and we talked about him with Rhett this morning. In my eyes, the more I look at Amen Thompson, the more I love him as a late-round flyer. Like the definition of the guy going after the 10th round that you should be taking a shot on. Because last year, Amen Thompson showed us that he has fantasy game. For the entire year, he played 22 minutes a game and was number 138. That was with lower assists because, again, role changing, stuff like that. 1.3 steals, 0.6 blocks, 6.6 rebounds. He's a terrific rebounding guard. I know he's a guard, but you know what? He's in anything, basically. In 25 minutes a game, this is including some games that still involved Alperen Şengün, Thompson was around number 80 in 9-cat. And then once Şengün went down, then he was absolutely dominating people. He was also a rookie. So an opportunity to get better from a guy that in 24, 25 minutes a game could be inside the top 100 without getting better. So if we say that 24 minutes a game is the floor for Thompson this year, it'd be very hard to see someone with his basketball ability to go lower than that. You're talking like 110 range. It's kind of the worst case in fantasy rank. And there's just so many ways that it gets better than that. Every extra minute he's on the floor, he's jumping around, basically. Do I think he gets up to 26, 27 minutes a game? Probably not, if that team is healthy, because you still got Dylan Brooks and Tari Eason and Cam Whitmore and Jalen Green, and the list goes on and on and on and on of everybody, Reed Shepherd, guys that are competing for the same stuff. But he's just good. And if you can get him in the 11th round, and 10th round value is kind of the floor, and there's just multiple 3, 4, 5, 6 rounds of potential upside if things keep breaking the right way. To me, he's one of the most important flyer types you should be looking at. I threw Trayce Jackson-Davis on the list at 128. This is borderline too early for him, in my estimation, because we just don't know what his role is going to be. I wanted to talk about him on today's show, not because I think Trayce Jackson-Davis is a quality sleeper, but because, honestly, we just haven't talked about him that much. We've had some guests say, oh, yeah, TJD, like, there's a way that this could work out. And, yeah, but, you know, he's like Derek Lively with a not as much of a guarantee. Trayce Jackson-Davis last year, the hell did he average for the season? He was at 8 points, 5 boards, 56% free throw, 0.4 steals, 1.1 blocks. I mean, he went on a run, and that's probably the part that everybody's going to be holding on to, is that he went on a run, and during that run, he played 22 minutes a game and was like number 140 as a punt free throw guy. But again, his stat set is remarkably similar to Derek Lively. Very similar players. Yes, one of them is sort of coming cheaper to your team than the other one. And if Trayce Jackson-Davis goes on a week or two where he shoots 55, 60% at the line instead of 50, then okay. Now he's inside the top 100. For Jackson-Davis, last 15 games last year, he played 25 minutes a game, averaged 11 and 7 with 2.6 defensive stats, 69% from the field and 55 at the foul line. That to me is kind of where everything belongs. That's probably a nice scenario. And that's good numbers. Those are good numbers. But I don't know how they go up. It almost seems impossible to clear that threshold. So if you're punting free throws, he's an excellent pick in this range, especially if you missed out on the other punt free throw guys a round or two earlier. If you're still trying to win free throws, you know, you're going to take a hit here. You're going to take a hit. But he's a reasonable player. And again, I'll go back in just a minute and assess all of these big men and all of these players we just named, and we'll kind of put them in a line. What do we got? We got 4, 5, 6 names. All right, I guess I got to hustle a little bit. Gary Trent Jr. is the next one that I wanted to talk about. He's not a sleeper, but at 131, he's just a guy that can, in starters minutes, be around top 100 because he'll get you steals, he'll get you threes. He's going to play. He's not going to rebound much. His free throw number was low last year. That hopefully comes back a little bit. It's super uninteresting and unexciting, but between Trent and then right behind him on the board is Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. You know, you can go with one of these guys if you need some steals and threes. Pope's going to have the better field goal and free throw percent. Trent is probably going to have the better 3-point marker. He'll probably make more of those than KCP. These guys are your boring types. They're, again, not traditional sleepers, but they're very safe picks in that 135 range. Trent 131, KCP 133. That'll probably be around 100 or better. KCP, I think, could go a little higher. And a lot of teams need that. that becomes a necessity. You can't go flyer on everything if, like, sure, you could end up dropping 3-4 guys the first couple weeks of the season, but especially in a head-to-head league, like, you need to have a full roster that you can run out there. And the first few weeks of the year, there might be 1 or 2 free agents you want to pick up, but there usually aren't 4, or at least you're going to end up dropping somebody that meant more to you, I guess. Last few names. I like this one a lot. Daniel Gafford at 142. He went way down in the last board shuffle. Gafford was, what the hell was he before that? 119, which admittedly was saucy. I liked him at 119. I don't care if he ends up as the backup on this Mavericks team, because Gafford is like a top 75 dude in 23 minutes a game because he's huge on defensive stats. He doesn't typically ruin you in free throws. I mean, small sample size, you might see something ugly. He's great field goal percent. He's a fantasy gold mine. He could go 22 minutes and he'd be worth drafting. Daniel Gafford at this spot, I adore it. 12th round, absolute must grab. I mean, behind Amen Thompson in this sort of later group is Gafford for me because he's coming so cheap. And I'm assuming that most of these other guys are off the board by the time you're thinking about Gafford. I would consider taking him over some of the names we've already talked about. And again, I'll line up some of that for you guys in just a minute. Next name on the board, we just have a couple left. Dyson Daniels, I think he's 154 as I quickly search for him for the YouTube crowd. I don't know what he's going to do. None of us really knows what he's going to be this year with Atlanta. But we've seen him in a starter's role, and the steals are robust. He's one of those guys that has the fantasy profile to push high ones, maybe close to 2 steals per game. 1 3-pointer. Maybe you get 5-6 rebounds, 4 or 5 assists. He's going to be kind of one of those backwards type of fantasy players. How does that equate to actual ranking? That's almost impossible to know because his percentages stink. He's not going to score. His turnovers will be low. But he's going to be a guy that fits nicely next to Trae Young. So maybe more of a specialist appeal for Daniels. But hey, what if the rebounds, assists, and steals get so big that he does kind of overwhelm the rank board that way? And that's why I like him at 154. I think he's a very reasonable play there. Just 2 names left, and they come with, one of them comes with an enormous caveat. It's going to take me a second to find him for those that are watching along. But that player is Jonathan Isaac, who I think is in front. Yeah, Jonathan Isaac. Games cap only. You guys hear me? I'll say it again. Games cap only. Do not draft in head-to-head under any circumstance. Because he's only going to play reasonable minutes when he has like 2 days of rest. We saw that towards the end of last year. It's why his minutes went up at the end of the season when they were resting him 2 out of every 3 ball games. And in the playoffs when there's like 1 or 2 days off between every game. And they didn't have to change cities. Like, that was when you saw more Jonathan Isaac. And that's when he can be a fantasy ridiculous juggernaut. All he needs is 20 minutes to go big time. And if he gets a ton of rest between certain games, maybe they'll go 22, 23 minutes. And now you're talking about a guy with big time upside. But in between that, day off here, day off there, 2 days off here, 2 days off there. All of a sudden, there's a day where he plays 4 minutes and then just sits the rest of the game. Disaster waiting to happen in a lot of situations. But games cap formats, you could get him, and we can see for a few weeks how the Magic are spacing out his minutes. What's the pattern? Play into it and catch the good ones. Do not draft in head-to-head, though. And finally, PJ Washington at 193. This one, he went down from 181 to 193 in the last board rearrangement, which surprised the hell out of me because, like, look at the guys that are ranked near PJ on the Yahoo board. Peyton Watson, backup. Goga Batadze, backup. Kyle Lowry, 900 years old. Grant Williams only did stuff because everyone was out on the Hornets. Nick Richards, backup. Dorian Finney-Smith, no fantasy game and might get traded. Like, what kind of weird ball game are we playing here? PJ Washington, after getting traded to Dallas, was actually fantasy startable. Second half of the year, he was basically a fantasy start. He sat just outside the top 100. And once he got warm for Dallas, he moved inside the top 100. Remember, he went on a heater at the very end of the regular season that he carried into the early part of the playoffs. And a heater for PJ Washington didn't take a lot. He shot 45% over the last 10 games of the year. And he ended up averaging 14, 7, and 2 with 2.4 defensive stats, 2.6 threes. And this was an unseasonably low free throw number at 59% over that run. We've all forgotten that PJ Washington actually has a pretty versatile fantasy game. He can be a 1-1-1 guy, threes, steals, and blocks. He can get you 6+ rebounds. He can score a little bit, not much, with Kyrie and Luka around. His percentages are generally going to hurt you a tad. But again, at 190-something, who cares? You might be able to draft a dude who's pre-ranked 193 who sits inside the top 100. It's possible. I mean, yeah, there's not a whole lot of upside there. He's not going to catch fire and take 15 shots a game. That's a team that brought in Klay Thompson as well. So shots are drying up, if anything. But he's the power forward on that team. They were much, much better when he was playing big minutes. And we saw that down the stretch. He was playing 33 minutes a ball game. That's his job. They loved what they got out of him in Dallas. I expect him to play starters minutes. And of all these guys that are ranked way the hell down here, this is deep stuff. There is no one else that has fantasy game quite like that, other than Jonathan Isaac, who's obviously much better fantasy game-wise and whose body won't subsist. But you got these other dudes that you could give them 40 minutes and they wouldn't hit the top 100. Lou Dort, people? Lou Dort's never made a fantasy impact. He has one game a month where he hits 6 3-pointers, and then we all go, hey, Lou Dort, and then he's gone. Meanwhile, you got a guy who quite literally was a top 70 player for the last month of last year. And 100 range for the last 2 months last year. That one I don't fully understand. He should be higher up the board, and maybe he will be during the next time Yahoo shuffles the board. And that's about where we want to put a pin in things. I do want to give you guys a quick reassessment of some of the players here. So we'll do a recap towards the end of the show. Please do like, rate, and subscribe before I give you the recap. Follow me on Twitter at Dan Vespers and at Old Man Squad. And those reviews, again, they really do go a long way. So this is, again, the list of players we talked about today. This is not the order that I have them in, but this is the full list from today's show. Ivica Zubac, Bogdanovic, OG Anunoby, Onyeka Okongwu, Walker Kessler, Derek Lively II, Mike Conley, Mitchell Robinson, Colin Sexton, Al Horford, Amen Thompson, Gary Trent Jr., KCP, Daniel Gafford, Dyson Daniels, Jonathan Isaac, and PJ Washington. It shouldn't be a surprise that Ivica Zubac is one of my favorites in that group. He's also the earliest in pre-rank. Bogdanovic I also like quite a lot, actually, at 108. Mike Conley is pretty safe, if unspectacular, in that range, as is OG Anunoby. The guys with some upside that I love in the later group, Amen Thompson, Daniel Gafford. Those are probably two of the ones that I like the most in the later group. Onyeka Okongwu is interesting because he doesn't ruin your percentages. And then you've got this sort of punt free throw group, which is Kessler, Lively, Mitchell Robinson, Trace Jackson Davis. Pick one of those guys. But if you really, if it's coming right down to it, Kessler's probably the safest in that bunch. Robinson, probably the second. Lively the third, and Jackson Davis. Mitchell Robinson can't stay healthy, so maybe drop into the bottom in that group. But I don't know that I'm going to end up with any of those punt free throw dudes. But should you decide to take the plunge on them, Kessler is the one in that earlier group. And then, farther down the board, Trace Jackson Davis is the one that's kind of coming at a discount. The guys that I think are fine, that I don't know if they're about to explode, but I think are okay values, Gary Trent, KCP, Dyson Daniels, these guys should be okay. Al Horford is the one you're playing for the first half of the year. Colin Sexton, by the way, is another one that's kind of in that safe category with Conley and KCP and Trent. And I think that's a quick recap on all of them, right? So who do you want to make sure you leave the draft with? That's none. There's no such thing truly as a must draft. You could leave the draft without any of these guys and you'd still be fine. But if you're thinking about what round we're in, okay? So 96 is the end of the 8th round. 97 is the beginning of the 9th. It goes 97 to 108. there are only two of these players that are in that group. If you're choosing between Zubac and Bogdanovic, I'm going Zubac this year. And now from 109 to 120, a lot of players in that group. Of all of them, favorite would probably be Anunoby, but he might not be there. Then Conley, Sexton behind him. And then you drop into that big chunk of centers. I'd probably go with Okongwu for the better percentages, or Kessler if you need the blocks. From 121 to 132, you're choosing between Horford, Amen Thompson, and Gary Trent Jr. You probably, it depends on format. Horford if you're in a games cap. Amen Thompson if you're in anything else. I would like to end up with both of those guys, frankly. 133 to 144, I'd go Gafford would be my pick in that group. KCP would be the second choice. And then deeper than that, if your league goes 13 or more rounds, you go PJ Washington over Dyson Daniels, and then Jonathan Isaac is your games cap darling. And that is that. I just realized as I was looking at myself on the screen that I'm wearing a Cardinals shirt and a Royals hat. I look like I'm from the Midwest right now, the lower Midwest. I look like I'm from frankly, St. Louis. I look like I'm from Missouri. I'm not. My kid happened to be on both of these teams in Little League, and so I ended up with swag. Assistant Coach Dad at your service. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. This was the Must Draft Sleepers episode because search engine optimization is everything these days. But you guys know what it means. These are guys that I would target after pick 100 in fantasy leagues. And frankly, Zubac, I would probably target even a little bit earlier than that. Follow at Dan Vespers on Twitter. Follow at Old Man Squad on social media. I do a lot on Twitter, people. I know some of you are YouTube only. You got to get on Twitter if you want to get NBA news the fastest. You ain't winning your league if you ain't getting the news faster than other people. So do head on over there at DANBESBRIS. Like if you're watching. Subscribe no matter where you're at. And again, we'll just keep on trucking. Coming up on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball, we'll do a couple of team previews over the weekend. We got the Nets, the Knicks, and the Raptors still to go, and then we are finally all done with those. They ended up dragging on a little bit, I'll admit, but we'll pick 2 out of those 3 and do them over the weekend, and Monday we'll cycle back around. That's Labor Day here in the U.S., so probably just one show on Monday this week, and then we'll dive back into 2-a-days starting on Tuesday. Actually, I guess we could knock out all 3 of the damn team previews. I haven't decided yet. Maybe we'll do something silly on Monday. Maybe we'll do a mailbag. I haven't done one of those in a while. I don't know why I'm doing all this on air. Just, keep listening, keep watching. Let's get to the next episode. I'm Dan. I'll see you soon.